Welcome back to my shooting series. Now, I'm shooting this bow and not the new built bow because as of right now, I have not built it yet. I'm kind of going out of order here, but this is the technically 5th video in the series. So, bow build, once you build your bow, then we're gonna move on to this step right now. This one right here is already built because this is the one I had last year, so I'm just using it for the purposes of this video. So if you've been keeping up, we are shooting, getting ready for hunting season, and today we are doing a few things. First thing is we are analyzing my GoPro footage from all of the videos leading up until now, and so I'm gonna kind of walk you guys through my beginning shots and when we first started and I was shaky and not solid and all the things, to now where I've been shooting a while, I feel more steady, and you can kind of see all of the differences that I have made personally. And then after I go through that, I'm going to explain to you guys what I actually did to improve up until this point.
Alright, so let's analyze some of my GoPro shots. I believe these were from either the first or second video that I had done. We're obviously standing very close to the target still, and I am also doing the target archer draw. So let's kind of see. That's not a big deal. Okay, so upon the first shot, it seems like I dropped my arm quite a bit. And as you can see, I'm kind of holding the bow a little bit sideways. I feel like when I draw, I'm almost drawing not perfectly straight. Yeah, so for the second shot, kind of similar. I'm steady, but then once I shoot, it's like I'm not fully following through, and I drop my arm, which is something that I obviously can and should work on. Ooh, that one was good. Okay, so shot number 3 was literally perfect. That's exactly what you want. Full follow through. Let that arrow get out of the bow and to the target before you drop your arm. Okay, and then this one, let's see here. Steady, steady. I think I'm holding longer on this one maybe. This was when I was doing my stamina, so I'm curious if I drop my arm. Not terrible. Not bad for holding longer, but definitely the previous shot was the best for sure by far. Okay, let's see. We got a different angle here a little bit. This might also be a long hold. Holding, holding, holding. Steady though. Super steady. Not bad. I'll take it.
Okay, we're back. So now that we have kind of looked over my personal shooting, let's talk about form. Everyone's favorite topic. Not really. It's not mine. I am going to start by saying kind of like a personal preference, I guess, and that is that at the end of the day, true archery form doesn't really matter in a hunting situation, especially. I have seen people in both the target and hunting spaces who are really good and don't have good form, and then who are really good and have good form, and then all of the rest, like good form but terrible shot, you know? So like there's such a combination and it's so person dependent. So I don't want you guys to like think, oh my gosh, I have to have such good form to be a good shot. It's not true. Maybe it is, but maybe not, right? So we're all built a little bit different. Some of us have longer arms, some of us have short legs, whatever it is. So I think that kind of plays into it a little bit, and so I don't want you guys to overly stress over it. I'm just gonna give you the basics of what you kind of wanna pay attention to, and then as you're shooting, you're gonna kind of feel it out and feel, okay, when I do this one thing, I shoot better, right? So let's check out my form and see how it is. You know, now that we're sighted in and we can shoot however far we want to, I would still recommend, if you're gonna kind of work on your form, maybe keep it 20 yards and under until you really feel like your form is good and where you want it, and then you can start shooting a little bit extra, because any little mistakes that you're making within a close distance are only going to be amplified the farther away you get, right? So your arrow, obviously, if you're moving around like this on a dot at 20 yards, you're gonna end up doing this at 60 yards. So that's one thing that I have really paid attention to. We're gonna shoot, all right, 30 yards. Okay, so the first thing in the target world, at least when I was doing it, I did NASP, which is National Archery in the Schools program. And so when I was in high school, I was on the archery team, and we traveled and did a bunch of shoots, and we actually made it to nationals and did okay. We never did anything crazy, but for local, we did really well. And so some of the stuff that they would teach is like your stance, knock arrow, I think it's draw handset, bow handset, anchor, aim, release or something. I don't remember all the steps, but basically it was to kind of get you in the mind of make sure your form is right. And I will say, when you're target shooting, it might matter a little bit more because you're stationary, target's going to be the same every time, where if you're in a hunting situation, you might be in a tree and you have to stand up and kind of bend around the tree, or maybe you have to stay sitting, you know, or maybe the deer comes in on your offside and you gotta get flipped around. There's so many like extra variables. So this is why I say form is like not an end all be all for this situation. But the basics are, you want to have your feet roughly shoulder width apart. That's just so you have a solid stance, solid foundation, so you're not off balance. And then what I personally like to do is kind of have my left foot is obviously the foot closest to the bow. So I typically like to have my left foot kind of like not in front of me, but almost where, like if I'm shooting a target here, I like to kind of have my foot almost towards that target. And it could be the same as applied to a deer stand, but I want to have my foot kind of facing it, and instead of being perfectly like essentially broadside to the target, I like to have just a touch of an angle of like my body towards the target. So I would say like target here would be like 90 degrees. I want to be at almost a 45-ish with my body and my foot that's in the front. And the reason is, I have, I guess you could call it double jointed elbow, where my arm likes to get in the way of the string if I stiff arm it. And so when you're perfectly sideways to the target and you stiff arm, you're more likely gonna hit your like elbow area or even forearm with the string, where if you have that slight turn, it pushes your arm out enough that you're not gonna hit, but that you're also still kind of in that correct position. So I'll just kind of show you really quick. So this would be like sideways, okay? But if I turn ever so slightly and face more, I can shoot and not hit my arm. Okay? So that's the first tip. Second thing, and I am very guilty of this, is when we draw back, I'm sure I even did it there, I have a bad habit of leaning where I'm like hips forward kind of, because it feels more comfortable, but that just means that we have weak muscles in our back. And so to kind of compensate, what I try to do is that foot that's pointed towards the target, you're gonna put your weight more on that front foot and less on the back, because that'll keep your hips from wanting to do this. Instead, you're gonna have your weight forward, so it'll kind of push your hips back. You can also work out in the gym and kind of work on back muscles. I am not a gym goer, so I don't really have any specific recommendations, but if you do feel like you're kind of like doing one of these, probably means you should like strengthen your core and your back a little bit better. We've already been working on our shoulders, right? So that shouldn't be the issue, but it is all connected. So if you're gonna strengthen one thing, probably helps to strengthen the rest. I'll let that up to you. Do as I say, not as I do, kind of, because I don't do that. I just really try to work on keeping my weight shifted forward. And that's also going to happen naturally especially if you're a tree stand hunter, because if a deer's coming in, they're typically in a closer range than out. You know, we're not shooting like this. We're not shooting perfectly out. We're shooting, so our weight is gonna be in that foot anyway. So it's kind of good to practice that, because you're gonna have to kind of be used to that anyway. So the third thing is making sure that you're lining your peep up with your housing every time. And this kind of goes into like the technical side as well as the form, because you obviously want to try to be as consistent as you can. So, you know, if you're shooting like this one time and then you're shooting like this another time, it's probably gonna switch up a little bit on where your anchor points are. And anchor points are only like, they only mean so much. This is another thing that they teach typically, is like, make sure your nose is in the same spot every time, make sure you're lining it up with the corner of your mouth the same every time, which is why there's like kisser buttons and stuff like that on the market. If you notice, I don't have any of that on my bow. And that is because depending on your situation and how far you're shooting, your anchor points are going to change ever so slightly. What matters is the peep to your pin. So you don't necessarily want to be in the same exact position for a 20-yard straight on target shot versus a 65-yard uphill. You're gonna have kind of different adjustments just based on how it's gonna line up. You do want to be consistent, and what I like to do personally is, and this is because I also have a thumb button, so it helps. I would have it a little bit different maybe with an index trigger, but I typically aim to put this right in the corner of my mouth, and then what I immediately do is put my nose to the string, and then I'm looking down the peep, and whatever pin I'm choosing is the one that I'm centering with the peep. So if it's a 30-yard, I don't have 3 pins, but if I had a third pin and I'm shooting 30 yards, I'm gonna center that third pin with the peep instead of your top pin. Now that really depends on what kind of sight you have and how many pins you have. If you have a single pin, it's gonna be the same. You just dial your sight and line it up. Where if you have a 5 pin, you would just physically move your peep alignment to whatever pin you're focusing on. Next thing is our grip. And this is kind of one of those things that I hate to see it, because I see so many people holding their grip incorrectly. What I typically see is this. Fingers flailing around out here, or stick straight, okay? Or what I see is the death grip, and somebody just squeezing, and they're just gripping it as hard as they can. So the problem with the flailing fingers, one, when you're hunting, you have a broadhead on the end of your arrow. But depending on where your broadhead is, if your fingers are sticking out, there's a high risk of you slicing your hand. So don't do that. that freaks me out every time I see somebody with their fingers sticking out. I'm like, please put them down. Second thing, when you are straining, especially if you have like just a stiff hand, like if you're straining your arm like that, that means you're putting torque on the bow. And that equally goes for if you're death gripping it. It just means you're torquing it. And what torque is, in a archery sense, is instead of letting the bow like be where it needs to be and kind of like fall into place, I guess you could say, instead of that, if you're gripping the crap out of it, you're twisting it sideways. Let me show you from this angle. You're twisting it like this. This is torque. Okay, so you're putting unnecessary pressure on places like your cam, on your string, even your limbs, I guess technically. All those like pressure points on a bow that you should not have pressure points on any more than necessary. Because what that's gonna do is throw your shot off. So instead of your arrow coming out straight, it might kind of fishtail depending on which way you're pulling it. Or I have a tendency to shoot to the left. I don't know why. I sometimes just over grip and I pull it to the point where the arrow, it might fly straight, but it hits to the left every time. And that's one thing that I always have to like mentally pay attention to, is just to relax my hand. And so typically what I would recommend is, and this also helps with preventing you from hitting your arm, is you kind of want to have your hand at a 45-degree angle. So when you grab a bow, so this would be 0, this would be 90. You want to be halfway. So roughly 45 degrees, and you're going to have a relaxed hand. You're not going to stiff finger it, and you're not going to death grip it. You're just going to relax your fingers, pretend like you have no muscles in your fingers at a 45-degree angle, okay? And then once you're holding the bow, you're going to just ever so slightly put your fingertips right on the very outside of the grip. Technically the riser. So, like this. You're gonna go do, 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 do. Okay, but I'm not squeezing it. This would be squeezing. You don't do this. Don't do squeeze. And you don't want to do this. Just want to ever so slightly just relax. Okay? So like if I'm just barely on there. Okay? So I typically try to kind of line it up like right on the edge. And that helps you from torquing it, because you're kind of just almost not even holding the bow. It's being supported by your thumb and your index finger, like up at the palm mostly. So we'll do that. Okay, so I'm gonna slightly angle. I'm gonna center my peep to my pin. I'm gonna put my weight on my front foot, kick my hips back, and I'm gonna lightly hold the grip. Then I'm gonna aim. It's hard to talk through that doing it. Okay, and then the last thing that I really want to touch on is following through your shot. So, like I've mentioned in a lot of the videos, is a lot of us tend to punch. We get on that trigger and bam, make it go off. Or when we just barely get our pin where we want it, bam, shoot. And that's just like our natural reaction. But technically that is a little teeny piece of target panic. And so this is kind of why I wanted you guys to progress to get to this point, because I don't want you forming bad habits. And then when you get to now, we have the most weight that we've shot, the most distance that we've shot. We are trying to really figure out like everything that's happening, and form wise, there's a lot going on, right? So if you're starting off with a bad foundation, you can't like get better per se. So punching the trigger is one thing that I was really hoping we kind of work past at this point. And I'm not saying you guys all do it, but I did it. So when we get to here, like I said in the third video, whenever I set up my release, like I am pretty much ready to go. All it takes is a little slight squeeze and this is gonna go off, okay? And I do that on purpose because I wanna be where I'm ready, and then I don't have to think about moving and then resettling my pin. So you pretty much want to be where you're gonna be the second you draw back, right? So I'm gonna draw back, my thumb is not on the barrel, and the second that I get at full draw, I adjust my stance and then I'm on the barrel, right? Okay, so that prevents me from just slapping it because I'm already right there. And what you're gonna do, no matter if you have a thumb, a hinge, I mean whatever it is, you always want to do your best to pull through the shot. So essentially, like, envision the arrow being a straight line, which it is typically if you're tuned correctly. Straight line, but pretend that straight line extends back into your arm, okay? So whether it's an index or a button or a hinge, no matter what, you want to like envision basically the tip of my elbow to the tip of the arrow is one straight line. So if you can picture that as you're shooting, okay, when the arrow goes forward, you obviously want your arm to go backwards to continue that straight line. So I'll try to show you. Okay, I definitely hit another arrow down there. Hopefully I didn't bust it, but anyway, it's okay, I built new ones. I'm building new ones. So let's do one more. It's hard for me to like watch myself and then also shoot, so bear with me here. Okay, so hopefully that kind of portrayed it, but essentially we're doing the push and pull motion, but in a way that keeps it straight, because if you are torquing it or doing any kind of weird sideways motion, then that's where you have bad arrow flight, right? So that's why I said pretend like your arm is kind of an extension of the arrow, because you want to make sure it comes clean out of the bow. And so that might take some practice, because I know a lot of us, instead of like moving through the shot, we tend to just stay there. And if it works for you, fine, it might work for you. And that's why I said this is not a hill we need to die on, but this is just kind of something that I recommend.